With that, over to you, Debello. They're going to be talking to us about the role of women in times of crisis.
Dumelang, sanbonani, apsheni, molweni, goeiemiddag, good afternoon. I am so glad to be introducing our country, and hopefully everybody can see this picture of this beautiful rainbow country of South Africa, a country of warm people, a country of diversity in its nature, in its people, a country that still has a lot of hope for all of us that live in it, a country that welcomes those that come to visit, and most of the time they end up not wanting to leave because they just enjoy the warmth of its people and its country. As you can see in the pictures here, the diversity of this country is very enormous. As I was looking at the pictures, I started thinking we also need to change the picture of the soccer team and start putting Banyana Banyana, because that is our ladies national team, which continues to win. These men on these pictures are not doing justice to our country. We need to start having Banyana Banyana joining and being seen on this picture. What a powerful story that we have heard, from our sisters in Kenya. And if I listen to all the stories that we have heard so far, there is just so much that still has to happen in our world, whether it's in Europe or it's in Africa. There are just so many different stories that we need to be changing, the narrative that we need to be changing across the world. I am excited this afternoon to be moderating a conversation with three very powerful women that are based here in South Africa. And Tato, thank you very much for introducing us as the team here in South Africa. There are three women that will be joining us, and I hope that they are on video already. I'm not able to see them as yet. The first lady—
They are.
Great, wonderful, thank you. We are joined this afternoon by Shiphra Chisha. Shiphra is the president of the African Women in Business, an entity that's created to strengthen the wealth creating capacity of women by providing them with access to trade and investment in different sectors. She is also a proud grandmother of two boys who she calls Gran's Heartbeat. The second person who will be joining us today is Natasha Pillay. Natasha is a wave maker of Female Wave of Change in South Africa, and she is the founder and managing director of Napila Wellbeing Solutions. And the third person who will be joining us is Paballo Makhetha, who's also a Female Wave of Change wave maker, who is a published author, a transformational leader, and a deputy director in one of our government departments. Ladies, thank you so much for joining us this afternoon, and we're looking forward to this conversation with you. So if I could start with you, Natasha, because you are the one always on my screen here. How are you,
okay. Okay, so good afternoon, everyone. You've heard, I'm Natasha, and it's a privilege to be part of the Female Wave of Change tribe. I'm an entrepreneur, wellness specialist, a fatigue and fitness for work consultant, and I'm also a Reiki and Lighterian practitioner. I founded Napila Wellbeing Solutions last year with the aim of reaching small to medium organizations that don't necessarily have access to health and wellness solutions. The one thing I love about being South Africa is our richness in terms of the diverse cultures that we have. And I strongly relate to the concept we have called Ubuntu, which means I am because we are.
Wonderful. Thank you, Natasha. Welcome. Pabi, may I go to you?
Oh, yeah, sure. Hi, good afternoon, everyone. My name is Paballo Makhetha. Thank you so much, Tebello. I'll try and keep it brief. To my latest, most inspirational achievement, that of publishing my first novel on social challenges titled Mountains and Hills to Overcome. Other than that, I'm a mother, always on crisis mode, like most mothers, managing the crisis day and night. Mother of 3 children, and someone decided to make me a grandmother as well. So that is the most important role that I enjoy now. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Paballo, and welcome to being a Grammy, not a granny, a Grammy, a glamorous granny. Shiphra, over to you.
Thank you very much, Paballo, and please allow me to congratulate you on a successful conference, and absolute gratitude for having me. I'm in awe of the successes shared by women this morning, and particularly liked what shared from Pakistan said, Paballo, that despite being far from each other, hearing the stories of women and their successes encourage us. I am Shiphra Chisha, as mentioned, founder and president of the African Women in Business, an entity that provides skills for global trade and access to investments in 8 priority sectors. Founded in 2019, we have representation within 11 countries. And our initial role was to support implementation of the SADC Secretariat to make sure that economic growth and development happens. And as you've mentioned, I'm a proud grandmother of 2. I'm a member of the International Women's Forum, a 20-year organization of 7,000 elite women leaders represented in across 26 nations. And our role is to build a pipeline of women leaders through mentorship and education. And I'll stop there. What I love about South Africa, as you've mentioned, the diverse culture. Just yesterday, we celebrated these diverse cultures on our Heritage Day. Secondly, I think it has been mentioned by Natasha, the element of Ubuntu. You do not need to know a South African child for that child to call you ma, and give you a level of respect that is due to a parent. And you do not need to know a next person in South Africa for that person to give you a warm welcome and a smile and a nod. Thank you very much.
Thank you, ladies. Thank you, everybody. So, ladies, we were provided with the topic, especially in light of some of the recent events that we had in South Africa. And it's really, the topic is around the role of women in times of crisis. So 2 questions that I'd like to pose to each of you. And I will start back with Natasha, and then come back to Paballo and complete with Shiphra. The question for me is, in your perspective, Natasha, what have been the 2 most crises that women have faced in the last year? That's number 1. But number 2, I'm saying, what have been the most innovative and creative solutions that you have witnessed from women, especially when they bring out their feminine energy?
Thanks, Paballo. So I'm looking at this more from a health and well-being perspective. And the 2 critical issues faced by women in South Africa over the past year and a half is basically being gender-based violence and femicide, and also the challenges that have been experienced by the frontline workers who are mostly female. According to the World Health Organization, they actually estimate that 12.1 in every 100,000 women are victims of femicide in South Africa each year. And this is 5 times the global average of 2.6. And other forms of gender-based violence is also prevalent. With regards to our frontline workers, most of them are actually nurses, and they are actually female, and they have appeared to have a greater risk due to the number of households that are managed by single parents who are female. And they are at the risk of becoming infected. And furthermore, they are dealing with increased incidents of trauma, bereavement, working longer hours, having stress, anxiety, and burnout. In terms of how South Africans or South African women have dealt with this, before I go to that, I think it's also important to note that within South Africa, we have what we call a national strategic plan, which was launched in 2008 to address the high levels of intimate partner violence, rape, sexual offenses, and femicide in SA. And some of the initiatives that they have put in place is to broaden the access to justice for survivors, to look at changing behavior through raising awareness and prevention campaigns, and to create opportunities or economic opportunities for women that are vulnerable. In terms of frontline workers, they have provided access to a 24-hour confidential counseling program, which healthcare workers have access to via telecare, SMS, and digital platforms. In terms of how women have responded, I think this speaks to the beauty of our feminine energy, where we tap into the different hats that we wear. So I've basically put down a collection for our tribe today. The very first point is about learned helplessness, which is a common experience we have when we give up being rational. And it's about teaching us how we need to prioritize and focus on next steps, not allowing our emotions to allow us to become overwhelming and then to render us powerless. The next is to actually look at and to go to the truth and deal with it. New focus equals new parts. It may be unfamiliar and it may be wrong, but it's something that we still need to deal with. We need to deal with the cards that we have been dealt with. We need to learn to accept rather than resist what has been placed before us before we deal with a situation. And lastly, it's to enlist support. Instead of feeling like we are facing problems alone, we can draw strength and build resilience from having others to lean on. We need to open up around our feelings and take a step back and give them room to move. Thank you, Paballo.
Wonderful. Thank you so much, Natasha, for that. I think this issue of, focusing on the problem and not running away from it is quite key, because that's the first step towards healing. Paballo, in your terms, what have been some of the crises and how have you seen women creatively addressing them?
Thank you so much, Paballo. Thank you, Natasha. I think just to add on what Natasha said, gender-based violence was across the board. You know, it was not just a South African phenomenon that we saw hike, especially during the lockdown period. But I think of more interest to me was the increase of teenage pregnancies around the same time. I just could not wrap my head around our daughters being sent home, which is supposed to be a safe haven, and then being violated. So I was asking myself, who is impregnating these girls actually? And I know I spoke to some of our sisters in Kenya, and they were experiencing the same kind of challenges. And one gets to understand that as women, we sometimes straddled between our economic livelihood and standing up for the truth. Because 9 out of 10 times we know who the perpetrators are. Those are people that we have in our homes. It's our partners, our husbands, our uncles, even our sons. But we know that dare we speak, there goes bread from the table. So that has been a very difficult crisis for me to observe. And I think until we as mothers, as women, stand our ground to say, this is the truth, and whoever violates gets what he deserves, then we are not going to resolve that. But when that happens, I also see mothers stand up and say, not my daughter. She will deliver the baby. She will go back to school. Because some of the girls, once they've been violated in that way, they fall pregnant, they become mothers themselves and become unable to continue with their education. So applaud all those mothers who become grannies unplanned, and who take care of the grandchildren and actually compel their girl children to go back to school to better their future. Because if you marry them at 14, really, what are you hoping for? And it has been proven that most of these girls do not really recover unless they get proper support from the homes. So the home is the place where most things go wrong. And I think the home is the very place that we need to focus our energies on and correct it.
Great.
Thank you for now, Paballo. Yeah.
No, thank you. And I think what I love is because in South Africa, a lot of our mothers, grew up under the apartheid era, where a lot of opportunities were not provided to them. They're saying, no, it doesn't matter the circumstances. My daughter is not going to grow up in the similar way that I grew up. If the opportunity is there, my daughter is going to go, and get that education. Thank you for that. Shiphra, from your perspective in the business world, what have been some of the challenges and solutions that you've witnessed?
Thank you, Paballo, and please allow me to stay off for my bandwidth. And as I mentioned before, one of the joys of being in the continent is something called load shedding. Those who do not know must check it. And I always say, just looking at the crisis that women have faced during this time, that never in history has humanity advanced so much in science and technology, and yet resoundingly humbled, wholly brought down to its knees, despite all our genius and know-how. Hundreds of millions of women keep the continent's economy fabric together, as you would know, providing for their households and contributing meaningfully to the national, to our regional, as well as to our continental GDP through their daily toils and resilient trade relations. So women during this time, women entrepreneurs had to keep their businesses afloat. That's one thing that we experienced, while they continued to play their roles of supporting other women. Now, if you're in socioeconomic development like me, there are always thousands of women looking up to you, hoping you will succeed so that they can succeed. Now, women had to play multiple roles as they worked from home during lockdown. They had to be helpers, they had to be mothers, they had to be wives, they had to be teachers, businesswomen, and they also had to be efficient employees. And also have to make sure and ensure that they manage and balance all these roles. I liked what was mentioned this morning, that they had to navigate all these roles. Some went through divorces during this time, leading to mental health. And I think Sasha spoke extensively about that. And all this was coupled with grief of losing their loved ones. People dealt with grief at a level they never experienced. So women were at the coalface of gender-based violence. And people, despite all that, there was still an expectation to be productive. There was an expectation to show up and deliver. They had to make sure.
Regina Wainaina, thank you. Go ahead.
Thank you. Can I proceed? They had to make sure, I was saying they had to make sure that they maintained their composure. And however, as I always say, that as women, we have the inborn ability to navigate storms, but keep our composure. God made us that way. So as president of the African Women in Business, my current role involves managing 11 countries. And during this time, I also had to realize that our country chapter heads needed to first fill their own cups before they could give to the next person. So in summary, women had to keep their businesses afloat while playing these multiple roles, but are expected to keep it together. However, as Viola gracefully mentioned it this morning, that we learned to sit back and take a deep breath and do what we could. And we also had to learn to use our energy very consciously. Now, what are the innovative ideas that women came up with during this time? We saw that from local spazas, tiny tin roof shops, and uncountable kiosks and donkey-drawn carts littering, our small communities in big cities across Africa, to women investing in big infrastructural projects, women in the continent have demonstrated incredible resilience as they strive to feed their families and contribute meaningfully still to the GDP of various nations. So these resourceful women are some of the most critical backbones sustaining the continent. And the verdict was clear for us that if millions of women can successfully trade among themselves, albeit the rudimentary improvised manner, only our imagination could limit how far they could go. And when they have eventually supported with the right financial as well as technological tools to trade, thereby scaling up their enterprises. And I commend the South African government for innovative solutions that were implemented to ensure that our entrepreneurs were assisted and that women were still prioritized, and ensuring that they form part of the supply chain. Not all women benefited. However, these went a long way for us. Now, our organization, Tebello, was founded in 2019. So 2020 for us was the year of implementation and rollout, and also in all SADC nations. However, with the pandemic, we had to look at alternative solutions for business and for our members. Our women launched several digital platforms to assist each other and to ensure trade still happens. We also launched a trade platform, e-commerce platforms. These platforms enable women not only to trade, but to mentor each other and to be able to access counseling. Telehealth, which is not a new concept, as some of you would know, became a reality. The apps launched to ensure that doctors' consultation will be done online. We understood the concept of online education. Our women were able to tap into opportunities for online education and training and continue to ensure skills development, which was mentioned by one of your board members, Renee, this morning as a critical requirement. So few things were realized. Reducing gender digital divide to promote e-commerce was the key. They say the biggest obstacle to growth is your own mind. Conquer that and you can do anything. So lastly, most women had to conquer the fear of technology, and sad to say and admit that I was one of those. Thank you.
Thank you for admitting, Shiphra, because you're dealing with all of these big elements, you know, of trade and realizing that technology in our continent is going to be, you know, the platform that's going to be able to assist us. And we know that in our continent, most of the youth and most women actually have mobile phones. And I think what the pandemic also started showing us was how we can move, you know, the business and move the information from big computers and move it onto the mobiles, also because of the sparsity of, you know, of space in terms of where people are living. I'm glad to hear that, you know, you saw an improvement in your trade platforms, in the telehealth, and also, you know, what you mentioned about, you know, using the small donkey carts to move, you know, items in the environment, because people still needed to be fed, people still needed to be clothed, and women found ways to use the resources they have in their own societies to be able to move, to ensure that, you know, the communities continue. Tato, I'm not sure if there are any questions that you are seeing as yet before we get to conclude this session.
No question systems. The only question was how to get the book Mountains and Hills to Climb, and the answer has already been provided. Okay, wonderful. Because we don't want to take you know, too long, Shiphra, if you could also maybe just type the what is it? Oh, it's been a long day. the website address of your
African Women in Business. Yes.
Apologies. So one last question to all our you know, esteemed speakers. What is the one message that you would give to women of the world in terms of their role in times of crisis? Natasha, let me start with you again.
I think it's important for us to discover how we've changed year on year from one experience or one situation to another, that we need to pause and reflect and ask ourselves, how do we pursue our values? In dealing with a crisis or a situation, who do we want to be in response to that situation? What do we stand for, and how do we act?
Wonderful, thank you. Thank you so much. Paballo, your message?
Thank you again, Tebello. I think the family for me remains the primary institution where basic life values are supposed to be taught. And parents remain the first mentors, they remain the first teachers as the caregivers. And I think we cannot afford to have these reactive approaches to the social challenges that we have in our communities. We need to focus our energies and win the battle in our households, starting with our own offspring, moving into our neighborhoods, moving into our communities, extended family, before we even come to global platforms. Because if we do that on small scales, we're going to see a lot of impact in our immediate environments and grow that, these things tend to have a snowball effect. Good things and bad things. We need to start, instilling all these good things. The quality of parenting remains a determinant that can be attributed to most patterns of failure. Disastrous relationships, failed marriages, suicides, addictions. We see an increase of patrons in our jails and psychiatric institutions. So I just want to emphasize that my view is that parents, and especially mothers, are the agents of these socioeconomic revolutions that we want to see around us. We know that challenges such as poverty, disempowerment, and poor health contribute immensely to making some families more vulnerable than others. Someone spoke about single mom-headed families. We're seeing an increase in the single dad-headed families. In most of sub-Saharan Africa, we're seeing granny-headed families. And more scarily, we are also beginning to see an increase in child-headed families. So we know again that schools and communities become an extension of these family institutions. So that means they also need to be strengthened. They need to be capacitated to deal with the scourge of social challenges. Two questions that we're not going to get answers now, but a food for thought. How are we raising our girls and boys in our households for those of us who are parents? What values are we instilling to promote the probability of them becoming well-rounded adults? Isn't it time perhaps that we look at our different lifestyles? We start with ourselves, we look at our different parenting styles. And if we do that authentically, I've got no doubt that most of us would have to unlearn some of the things that we have known and believed to be true and retrain ourselves and the next generations on how life can be lived differently, more respectfully, more responsibly. And while I'm at it, I might as well just mention the possible strengths that contribute to the minimizing or prevention of these socioeconomic ills. Someone mentioned the principle of Ubuntu, and I think that's where we all need to start, which Ubuntu emphasizes the empathy, sharing, and cooperation as an effort of resolving common problems. We can borrow from that. We know that there's resilience and social capital, which have also been cited as important aspects that help us bounce back to some sort of normality after experiencing some type of trauma. So we need to incorporate those values as part of strengthening our households, as part of strengthening our community institutions as well. Wow. There's a lot of work to be done, ladies and gentlemen. The policies, well, I find that we so often look up to governments and international organizations to draft policies for us, grow the number of jails because there are so many rapists that are, that have been incarcerated. But until when are we going to grow jails and hospitals and all these things? We need to curb these challenges in our households. So women are at the forefront of implementing these policies that are crafted to deal with the scourge of the socio-economic imbalances worldwide.
Yeah, absolutely.
So,
I think,
work
yeah.
and correct the situation.
Absolutely. Paballo, I said one thing. I'm
an author.
Anyway, thank you. I think the key message, the key message for all of us is that charity begins at home. Charity begins at home. Thank you. So I know you are very passionate about this. I know, and we can see it and we can feel it. Thank you so much for that. Shiphra, what's the one message you want to leave with the women of the world?
Thank you so much. And I think for me, just a few things. A woman of value is that with a purpose. Purpose is a belief that you're part of something bigger than yourself. Have a greater sense of purpose, which is that of bringing people along with you. Lead a life of service, and do not, do not leave out of the memory, but leave out of your imagination. That is what kept us smiling in the midst of storms with composure. Prime Minister of Barbados in the recent, at the recent General Assembly said, and I quote, "Those who labor in great causes never ultimately fail, but they must summon the courage required. They must find the global moral strategic leadership, global because our problems are global, moral because we must do the right thing, strategic because we cannot solve every problem in the world, but we must solve those within our purview immediately," close quote. So now with every crisis comes an opportunity. Never, I always say, never has there been a time when the odds are for women and women in Africa. Do not waste this crisis. And absolute gratitude again for having us.
Wonderful. Thank you so much. Ladies, we've had women in Africa and I think also women across the world. Let's not waste, the opportunity that the crisis has brought for us. This wave of change that we say that we want to see in the world. What we're hearing is that we've got the opportunity to, create it from being resilient and using our own resourcefulness as women, from ensuring that charity begins at home, and from being able to look at each and every crisis that we have and say, how do we change it and how do we make it work to be able to achieve the purpose that we need to achieve in the world. Tato, the shortest of my times that I have had today. Thank you so much for allowing the South Africa chapter to have this conversation. And I am glad and hopeful that we've left some powerful messages with you. Back to you, my sister.